Next speaker is David Carlson. He's the Executive Director of Disability Rights Montana. Disability Rights Montana is the protection and advocacy organization for Montana, providing needed oversight and guidance and even participating in legislation and litigation to help protect the human and civil rights of Montanans with disabilities. David?
Thank you very much, Jed, and I'd like to thank Carlos and the rest of the LIFTT team for having us here, and more importantly, having the entire community here, welcoming them into their daily home. I am with Disability Rights Montana, and we are the protection and advocacy system. So let me tell you a little bit about what that is. Back in the late 60s, early to mid-late 60s, Robert Kennedy Sr. went to an institution called Willowbrook. And in that institution, he saw horrible things being done to people with developmental disabilities. And he held a press conference on the steps, said that the facility was a snake pit and someone needed to come in and do something about it. And guess what happened? Nothing, as often happens. But when one of the nation's most powerful lawyers and politicians from one of the most powerfully politically and financially connected families in the country can't get something done, it's probably not going to get done. So 6 years went by. Robert Kennedy was assassinated. You would think the facility was forgotten, but it wasn't forgotten because there were still people living there and family members who were concerned, people who were working at the place who knew it just wasn't right. And they reached out to a cub reporter who they convinced to come on out to the facility. And he snuck cameras into the facility. He snuck people out of the facility to go interview at a doctor's house in the evening. And then he also arranged for the typical dog and pony show that if media wants to come, the facility will show them, hey, it's all great. And he showed the difference between what the facility wants you to see and what you actually see when you sneak inside with cameras. And that reporter, that was his first big break. He was just a local reporter on New York News, and we all now know him. Geraldo Rivera became a national household name both in news and during his talk show days in the 80s. And he still, to this day, thinks back on that first big story of his as a life-defining moment. It was a life-defining moment for many other people too, because once the word got out, not just now to New York news, but it got picked up by stations across the country, Congress had to do something. It was being beamed into people's homes. It wasn't just a lawyer standing on the front steps of a place. We got to see naked people huddled on the ground with food being shoved into their mouths quickly, people sick, people not getting the treatment that we were all being promised they were getting. They said, don't worry, just give them over to us, the state will take care of those people. What they were doing was warehousing those people, treating the people's boxes, saying how many can we fit in this building, now we're done with them and move on to the next government related issue that they want to deal with. So Congress had to decide what to do. They could say, there is no such thing as privacy in America. Reporters can go anywhere they want, record anything they want. That wasn't going to be quite right. That didn't sound right. What they did instead was they said there has to be a group of lawyers and other advocates in every state and territory to be independent watchdogs on what anybody in that state is doing. If they're the state government and they're running a facility, they have to be able to go in and take a look at it. If they are a private nursing home, they have to let these people in. If they're your local hospital or clinic or homeless shelter or jail, if there are people with disabilities there, we need someone who will go in and make sure people are not being mistreated. And they created what is known as the protection and advocacy systems, and that is what I work for. So there's one in every state and territory, as well as the Native American nations in the Four Corners region have their own protection and advocacy system as well. So there's 57 of us, and we're all run independent of state government, independent of federal government, We are run by boards of directors here in Montana by Montanans, Montanans with disabilities and family members of with disabilities, set our annual priorities to say, use your incredible power to go anywhere there is a person with a disability and do any type of advocacy that is necessary. We can do class action lawsuits, we can do individual lawsuits, we can help people write a letter to their landlord to explain what's going on. We can help people educate their lawmakers about the unintended consequences of a bill that was passed last year, or the benefits of regulating this or that differently. So we end up showing up all over, but usually behind the scenes. We're going to the state psychiatric hospital, we're going to nursing homes, we're going to day and residential services for people with developmental disabilities, places no one else can go because of legitimate, important privacy interests. But we're making sure that the people who are delivering services are not hiding behind that privacy and using it to abuse without any oversight. We also audit the books of people who manage the funds of Social Security recipients. So if you receive Social Security funds and the Social Security Administration doesn't think you should be managing your own funds because you might be taken advantage of, they will give that money to someone else. The problem is that person might take advantage of you. So Congress said, you know what, we should get those protection advocacy guys over here again and have them make sure that people's finances aren't being misused. So if you hear of someone being mistreated in their own home by an in-home care worker, in a nursing home by a CNA, or in an employment setting. I once investigated a sheltered workshop. That's where a lot of people with disabilities end up being told they can work is only in this warehouse with only other people with disabilities. And one of the supervisors there, to teach people with disabilities how to do this job in this lumber yard, would stomp on their feet every time they took an extra step. It was like, you only need to take 2 steps to get there. Don't. And so anytime someone would take 3 steps, he'd be there to stomp on their foot. So wherever the abuse is happening, wherever the financial exploitation is happening, you can always call Disability Rights Montana. That's an authority we have to go in and investigate and then do advocacy as needed. And that brings me to today. We have the Americans with Disabilities Act is celebrating its 35th anniversary. And that is incredible. It was based on an even older law from the early 1970s called Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. And it took, at that time, the Rehabilitation Act said the federal government and the entities the federal government funds can't discriminate against people with disabilities. The Americans with Disabilities Act made that much broader and said private employers can't discriminate, the state government and city governments can't discriminate against people with disabilities. And you can't discriminate against people with disabilities if you're generally open to the public, if you are an Applebee's or a Chipotle restaurant, or if you are a local swimming pool that is open to the public. You may not be a public entity, you're not owned by the local city, but if you're open to the public for business, it's called a place of public accommodation, you can't discriminate against people with disabilities. And so then we saw the world open up much more broadly. Those laws, though, didn't just happen because some legislator thought it'd be a good idea and let's do something nice for people with disabilities for a change. Much like when the protection and advocacy systems were started, Congress had to have their arm twisted to get it done. They had powerful people telling them this is an important thing to do. They still didn't do it. It was when their voters saw, oh man, there's some pretty bad stuff going on in our own name as the state government, as the federal government. We don't want that. Stop it. So much the same thing, 504 was passed because people with disabilities shut down New York City by rolling their wheelchairs out in the middle of the street and said, we're not moving until you make this place more accessible. The ADA was passed because people with disabilities across the disability spectrum, we are a very broad community. People who are neurodiverse or have heart conditions like myself, all the way to people who use wheelchairs to get around the community, people who have intellectual disabilities, people with mental illness, people with sensory disabilities. We can sometimes just sort of hang out in our own little camps. Maybe we don't even identify with disability at all because of stigma or what's the value in it. But when we start to identify with our own individual disabilities, and then we start to identify with our community, and that's the great thing LIFTT has done here today, is to show us the huge, strong community we have. If you step outside, you see the tents are full of people talking, exchanging information from their own individual perspectives, but it all builds to a larger community. And that's what got the Americans with Disabilities law passed. It's also what is defending it right now. We've got an executive order that was signed on Thursday that wants to start reinstitutionalizing people with disabilities. We spent 50 years trying to move people out of institutions, and now, as a response to our incredible housing crisis we have in this country, the solution is being proposed that we should pathologize and criminalize homelessness and force people into treatment or jails if they are homeless. And that would be a violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act and the civil rights case law that has come out of that. Many people have heard of the Olmstead lawsuit, or like I like to reference it, the Lois and Elaine lawsuit. Lois Curtis and Elaine Wilson were the two women who were being held unnecessarily in an institution and fought all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court to get the right to live in the community. We don't want to go backwards. That was in 1999. That wasn't that long ago. That's within our lifetimes. It was routine and assumed that if you had a disability, you will be going to an institution to get treatment. But then the Supreme Court said, no, if there are community services that can meet your needs and you want to live in the community, go live in the community. The state must deliver those services to you if they would otherwise deliver them to other people. And so we need to rally together to keep the ADA vital and strong today, 35 years later. And that's not as insurmountable as it may sound. Earlier this spring and this winter, the Montana Attorney General sought to find Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act unconstitutional and unenforceable. He filed a federal lawsuit to try to do that. And remember, I told you, that was the original law that the ADA was based on. And he wanted to say that that is unconstitutional. Montana's disability community rallied together. LIFTT wrote letters to the Attorney General. We held a press conference in Helena and then hand-delivered, many people from across the disability community then hand-delivered that letter to the Attorney General's office demanding that he back down from that lawsuit. We even held an art installation where we got one of those old school pencil sharpeners and we ground pencils down to the nub and threw them to the floor for every kid that would lose their 504 plan if Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act was found unconstitutional. Eventually, the Attorney General and his buddies in 16 other states, the Attorney Generals of those other states, backed down. And they pulled that section out of their lawsuit. And they said, we will no longer be seeking to find 504 unconstitutional and unenforceable. That was just this spring. And there was a legitimate, hard-fought attack against our rights, and the disability community responded and fought back. There are ongoing attacks on our rights to live in the community, on our rights to get Medicaid services, on our rights to get food assistance, and we can continue to fight back. Make sure that our state administers its programs legally and responsibly. Make sure that if we run a state psychiatric hospital, it meets constitutional and federal statutory minimums as far as quality goes. It does not currently. It has been delicensed or decertified by the federal government because it doesn't meet minimum requirements for our psychiatric hospital. These are things that we, Montanans, can fight for here in Montana. Not everything is a big Washington, D.C. thing or a global warming, what can you possibly do thing. They are make our local politicians listen to us because we are the experts in our lives. So like LIFTT, we think we derive our power from the disability community and we want to help make it strong and nourish it. So if you are interested in connecting with the advocacy side, the lawyers for the disability community, and being a part of that drive, connect with LIFTT, connect with us at Disability Rights Montana, and we can partner to make sure that not only do our old laws continue to be effective, but we can be focused on what's the next law we need to build, what's the next issue we need to tackle and that we're the experts on because we live the lives that that could be improved by changing policy. So please join LIFTT and Disability Rights Montana as we build towards the tomorrow part, the second T in LIFTT's name. So thank you.